Some Democrats are upset in Washington over U.S. President Joe Biden's handling of the situation in Afghanistan. Some have kind of distanced themselves and even defected. To talk about this in more detail is U.S. political reporter and our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Now, Lisa, some Democrats in swing states are publicly distancing themselves right now from the president.
That's what we're hearing. I mean, let's see if they don't buckle under the pressure of the party. And the party, of course, astoundingly, is standing behind the president and this awful withdrawal from Afghanistan. Look, we're in a time and place, unfortunately, where we're not looking at the facts, we're not looking at the state of the country, we're not looking at the future of the country. We're looking at the party, we're looking at the candidate, we're not looking at what's best for our assets and our national security. What happened in Afghanistan is a bipartisan crisis. Regardless of who's in power, that is something that just needs to be reviewed, it needs to be corrected, and we need to have a very firm position on where the United States stands on the war on terror. There's no such thing as a moderate terrorist. There's no such thing as the moderate Taliban. There's no working with them. There's no good guy, bad guys on the ground over there. Everyone's a bad guy and everyone's assumed to be a terrorist. And the way that the Biden administration handled this was a mess. It lacked any strategy. They are claiming that they just didn't know. They couldn't have assumed or predicted that the Taliban would take over so quickly. And on the other hand, we have plenty of reports that say that they were warned from the ground. The Secretary of State and others received ample warning that this was going to happen. And look, a 5-year-old can understand. The Taliban are on the ground and they're going to take over. And we didn't need this to countdown to crisis that we had. And it wasn't as much of a surprise as the administration is claiming it to be. So, of course, there are Democrats who are trying to distance themselves. But again, let's see how long this lasts. If they will be called, obviously, into session in September when Congress meets to discuss this. Too little, too late, of course, at that point. But we're hoping by the time we do our full withdrawal, we'll at least have some semblance of an idea of where we're going to take this going forward.
Now, Lisa, a new poll says most Americans believe the U.S. should have stayed in Afghanistan until Afghan allies were fully evacuated. Around 70% agreed with the statement, according to the new study done by Ipsos and ABC News.
Yeah, and that's that's actually good news to see that the American people understand that getting our Americans and our allies and anyone who helped, meaning the Afghan people who helped the United States get them out and get them safe, is much more important than a deadline. Even though the Taliban did warn us that we have to keep to our deadline, I think this is a great place to start our positioning to say that we're going to stay for as long as it takes to get everyone out. Now, these numbers are all fudged, so we don't know how many people still remain. According to the State Department just yesterday, there was only 250 more people that need to be taken out. I don't buy that for a minute. Obviously, there's many, many more, whether they are actual Americans or those who helped Americans or allies who need to get out. This is, again, it's not going to be something that's going to be completed this week. So I hope that we do have the backbone to at least say that Americans come first, our allies come first, and we need to get these people out of harm's way.
I'm glad you brought up all of the evacuations. Recent reports now say that all local Afghan staffers at the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, including their families, have been evacuated. And a new report says close to 2,800 Afghans departed the airport as of 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday. But Lisa, let me ask you something. A lot of people are concerned. How many jihadists are posing as refugees that are leaving Afghanistan, and will they be properly vetted in places like Germany?
Right, and that's really the most important question here is that not only are these the people who are at the airport being threatened by terrorists, but how many of those terrorists are actually getting on board one of these flights and heading to the United States or to Europe to carry out more attacks. Look, we have no way of vetting, and that's been the crisis for us for a very long time, over a decade. We've had this issue in Syria, we have this issue in Iraq, we have this issue at our southern border, and it continues to this day. We can't vet them for COVID or for terrorism or any other, nefarious activities and backgrounds. So That remains the problem. Obviously, President Biden tried to tell us that these people were being thoroughly investigated and thoroughly checked out. It's impossible. We don't even know who's getting to the airport, who's being stopped on the way to the airport, who's getting on a plane. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the footage as to what kind of chaos persists at the airport. This is yet another issue that we'll have to deal with down the line. But that just calls for, more vigilance on our end here in the West, whether it's in Europe and Germany, any base that they land upon in the United States. This is going to have a lot of repercussions. So when people talk about immigration, when we talk about not having such a lax immigration, we can look at the Europeans for an example as to where that got them. A lot of jihadis landing there. That was as a result of the Arab Spring, Arab nations where the immigrants started walking, and they arrived in places like Europe, where they carried out many, many, many suicide bombs and other things. So again, this is going to have a very, very significant ripple effect on the war on terror globally.
Another issue as well are how many of the refugees may have COVID-19 and the deadly Delta variant that they'll be bringing to North America. So people need to be screened for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's screened for everything. It's a mess, and you can't leave them there. You can't not take them out. I don't think there's any way to properly vet these individuals. We hope that there's no way to social distance at the airport, but we hope that once they do get to a safe place, that they can at least be checked out over there and properly screened for all of the above.
Now, Lisa, the LGBTQ2 plus community in Afghanistan is fearing for their safety with the new Taliban regime in power. A quote from another news source, The Hill, says, quote, "They will kill us if they find us."
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many marginalized groups on the ground over there, and you can look at any Muslim society that runs on Sharia law to see how they feel about women and children and their rights, about journalists and artists and dancers, and of course marginalized groups like the gay, lesbian, LGBTQ plus community that has always been marginalized in the Middle East and Middle Eastern communities, except for a country like Israel, where they actually have a gay pride parade. In every other country, they have been marginalized and persecuted in many ways. And in some cases, like the Iranian regime, they've been sentenced to death for homosexuality. So obviously, the Afghan community understands this. They know that their fate it doesn't look too good at the hands of the Taliban and Sharia law. And the same thing goes for women. They've been told not to go to work. They've been told not to go to university. Women are stopped by the morality police to be checked out to make sure that their headscarves and clothes and knees and elbows and toes are all covered. It's going to be a big change, even though this is, Middle Eastern society is always conservative and obviously very modest, particularly regarding their women. But this is a whole different ballgame under the Taliban.
The U.S. announced recently a joint arrangement to continue evacuating Afghan allies past the August 31st pullout deadline. Lisa, that's good news.
Yeah, it's good news that at least our allies have the backbone to maybe lead the way on this, where we won't take no for an answer. It doesn't matter how much the Taliban want to stop us or to block the roads to the airport. We need to get everyone out. And this is where the coordination comes into place, where they need to coordinate and communicate and get themselves to the airport. And we have to rely on, of course, the Taliban. That's the sad part. We have to rely on a terror organization as our partners on the ground to get these individuals out. And it's horrific. It's horrific. And, fingers crossed, we pray that we can get these individuals out and out of harm's way. And it's not just the U.S. or allied nationals that need to get out. There are also Afghans who are translators and researchers and people who are part of think tanks who helped us. And they're considered spies in the eyes of the Taliban. So we need to help get them out as well.
The Taliban actually say that they will assure world leaders that they will let eligible people leave Afghanistan, but really, can they be trusted?
Right. And that's the question. If they can be trusted, we wouldn't have this issue at the airport. If they could be trusted, the roads to the airport wouldn't be lined with Taliban fighters stopping cars and not letting them through. Look, their issue is that they don't want the smart people and the service providers of Afghanistan to leave. They don't want this so-called brain drain to happen. So they're going to stop any Afghans. They're going to stop any individuals who might have, secrets and be able to tell them more about the way that things work. they've inherited an entire country. They've inherited an army. They've inherited weapons, and now they need training and they need these individuals to help them on the ground. So they're not keen to let their smart people get to the airport and get home safely. They'd rather keep them there. And this is where we feared a hostage crisis. They're not only going to become hostage, they're going to become indentured servants to the Taliban, a terror organization. Again, I keep repeating that because it seems like if you look at the briefings from the Pentagon or the White House, you think that the Taliban are our partners on the ground. That's the way they're painting this out to be. And let's not be distracted by the fact that for decades we have fought the Taliban. We have tried to eradicate their presence from Afghanistan, and we're not able to. And now they have inherited a country that we have helped fortify.
Now, Lisa, the U.S. drones are becoming quite the weapon in Afghanistan, taking out some ISIS members. Tell me more about that.
Right. So again, with the distraction or the differentiation between terror organizations, we have ISIS-K on the ground. They are the ones who claimed responsibility for the explosions that happened at Kabul airport. But again, I will remind everyone not to differentiate between terror groups. These are both terrorists, even though, again, the White House is telling us that ISIS is actually an enemy of the Taliban. So now we're creating a good cop, bad cop situation in which one terror organization is moderate in comparison to the other one. Just a distraction. At no point was ISIS, even the ISIS caliphate in Syria or Iraq, a major terror threat that was leading a country the way that the Taliban is now leading Afghanistan. Look, we had Al Qaeda, we had ISIS. They were all operating out of caves, and look what they were capable of doing. How much destruction and death they were capable of carrying out. And now look at this terror organization that actually has a country and a whole entire weapons arsenal at its disposal. So our focus right now, from the point of view of the United States, is ISIS because they carried out this alleged attack at the airport. So these target attacks were only for ISIS, and we are told by the White House that we relied on the Taliban in order to take out these targets. Again, we're telling our secrets to the Taliban in order to take out ISIS. So it's a very complex situation, very layered, very nuanced. But again, we need to treat them both as threats, both as terror groups, and both as enemies in this war on terror.
Yeah, you can't really say the enemy of my enemy is my friend in this case. That really doesn't apply here. Now, Lisa, according to the New York Post, they're reporting that a U.S. airstrike near the Kabul airport actually took out Afghan civilians, including kids. Many people were killed there.
Yes, again, this was supposed to be a very targeted attack. Civilians died. I have read reports that children were involved as well in the casualties, which is very unfortunate because we wanted this to be a very clean evacuation. We wanted this to be a withdrawal that would mean fewer casualties. And we had 13 Americans who died in a very senseless death while at the airport. And now we have more casualties, Afghans and young Afghans who died as a result of these targeted attacks. So we're hoping that this is the end of the casualties and that we're able to go on and deal with this crisis in a more manageable way.
Meanwhile, over in Damascus right now, Iran and Syria vowed to take mighty steps to confront U.S. sanctions imposed on the two allies, saying their relations will strengthen under Iran's new leadership.
Yes, well, their relationship is pretty ironclad. I've never been worried about it, and never did I lose sleep over the fact that the Syrian regime and the Iranian regime are very tight. And of course, this new regime in Iran, under President Raisi, who was just sworn into office, is going to be much more hawkish. I've never believed that there was ever a moderate government in Iran or a moderate president under Hassan Rouhani. But they did at least put on the facade of him being a moderate leader, and now there's no more facade. And it goes, it goes hand in hand with what we have at what's perceived in our White House. So there's more chest thumping from around the world and our enemies because they perceive the White House to be weak. They perceive our foreign policy to be weak. They perceive us to have a leadership that does not want to lead or to get in the way to confront our enemies. And so, of course, we have this announcement by Syria and the Iranian regime to say we're going to fight against U.S. sanctions. Why not? Why shouldn't they fight against U.S. sanctions? Sanctions are damaging. They have obviously put a dent into the Iranian economy as well as their activities on the ground in Syria. So, of course, they're going to boast and say, we're going to fight back and we're going to get these sanctions removed.
Bringing things closer to home for just a moment here, Lisa, let's chat about the wildfires in your state in California. Are the firefighters getting the upper hand, especially in the northern part of the state?
Yes, it seems like they're doing a better job now, but there's a lot of mismanagement. Of course, many are upset with Governor Newsom because of the information that was put out about the fires. We are facing a recall here in California to remove Governor Newsom in mid-September. This actually, the talk of the fires has been very much enshrouded in the talk about the recall as well, because we obviously have an issue with fires in California. They are brush fires as well as arson, and the arson can be prevented, and that goes because of the lack of attention that's paid to the homeless that has increased. We know Governor Newsom has invited homeless people to come to California. That's received a lot of backlash, and of course, dealing with the energy companies that can also, help the situation with holding them accountable for many of these fires, or at least getting more information from them to prevent future fires, hopefully.
U.S. political reporter and our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, thanks again for joining me from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.